Did you know? Between 1994 and 1998, up to 2 million North Koreans starved to death. The regime proudly called this disaster the Arduous March, but for the people, it was not pride, it was a march through hunger, despair, and death. The roots of this tragedy began in 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed. For decades, North Korea had depended on Moscow for as much as 70% of its fuel and nearly 80% of its trade. Trains, tractors, and factories all ran on Soviet oil. Fertilizer, spare parts, and pesticides all came from abroad. When that support suddenly ended, the system crumbled. Factories stopped running, tractors had no fuel, and entire farms were left without the machinery to plant or harvest. By 1993, food production was already shrinking. Then nature struck with brutal force. In 1995, massive floods covered farmland across the country, destroying more than 1.5 million tons of grain. The following year, floods came again, washing away homes, fields, and storage facilities. In 1997, a severe drought wiped out another 500,000 tons. Without reserves, without imports, and without functioning infrastructure, there was nothing left. The public ration system, once the lifeline for 70% of the population, collapsed completely. Families who had relied on monthly food distributions suddenly had nothing, not a single kilogram of rice or corn. Ordinary people were left with desperate choices. Families boiled tree bark, wild grass, and corn husks just to survive another day. Bitter root paste became a substitute for meals. Some chewed on leather, others ground corn cobs into powder to fill their stomachs. Many scavenged in mountains, river banks, and fields for anything edible. Others dug through garbage pits hoping to find something rotten but still chewable. Eyewitnesses remember families fainting in the fields, unable to stand from hunger. One survivor recalled, "Only when you lose all energy and end up in a sickbed do you realize that you haven't eaten well." It was during this time that a tragic new word spread across North Korea, ggot. It literally means flower, swallows. It described children wandering from place to place, homeless and starving, fluttering like little birds searching for food. Most were orphans who had lost their parents to famine. They slept in train stations, in empty sheds, or under bridges. They begged for scraps in the markets and searched garbage dumps for grains of rice. But it wasn't only children. Adults, too, were reduced to the same life, drifting through towns and villages in search of anything to eat. Still, the word ggot became a symbol of the innocent. Children with hollow eyes and empty stomachs, too weak to cry. Some estimates suggest as many as 300,000 children became orphans during this period. Some died alone on the roadside, their bodies left unclaimed. Others formed small groups to survive together, stealing or begging for scraps, or riding trains from city to city in search of food. A defector remembered, "At the worst of it, I saw so many starving families that the death carts rolled endlessly past my school." Historians debate the numbers, but estimates range from 600,000 to as high as 2 million deaths. Some outside sources suggest it may have reached 3 million. In some provinces, up to 20% of the population perished. Entire villages became ghost towns. Fields were left untended because no one remained to work them. In many towns, one household after another went dark. International observers who visited the countryside described walking past rows of empty homes, silence replacing the normal sounds of life. The United Nations World Food Program reported malnutrition rates of over 60% in some provinces. Aid agencies described children with hair turning orange, a classic sign of protein deficiency. Between 1995 and 1998, foreign governments and NGOs sent millions of tons of food aid, but much of it never reached the ordinary people. Instead, it was distributed to the military, the elite, or siphoned away by corrupt officials. A later UN Commission of Inquiry concluded that famine-era policies amounted to crimes against humanity, saying the state deliberately prolonged starvation as a tool of control. Yet in the middle of despair, something unexpected happened. Out of desperation, people began trading illegally when that became known as jangmadang, or black markets. Mothers sold whatever they had, clothes, tools, even family heirlooms, just to buy a handful of rice. Farmers secretly sold potatoes and corn to survive. These markets, born in shadows, slowly became the only way for families to eat. And over time, they grew into a permanent part of North Korean society, changing the way ordinary people lived. Even today, jangmadang remains central to survival inside the country. But for many, survival at home was impossible. As hunger deepened, thousands risked crossing the icy rivers into China. They did not risk their lives for freedom or politics. Most simply wanted to fill their stomachs and survive. But survival in China often turned into another nightmare. Many defectors, especially women and girls, were kidnapped and sold. Some were forced into marriages with poor rural farmers, others into hard labor, and some faced even worse. Reports say many were sold for as little as 2,000 yuan, about $280. Human lives traded at the price of a used bicycle. Families torn apart once again, this time not by famine, but by exploitation. The government called it the Arduous March, but for ordinary people, it was a time of hunger, loss, and unimaginable suffering. Eyewitnesses still recall the smell of starvation in villages, the silence of entire neighborhoods, and the sight of small children too weak to lift their heads. This was not just a famine, it was a national catastrophe, one that still shapes the lives of millions in North Korea today. And even now, UN reports warn that more than 40% of North Koreans remain undernourished, a chilling legacy of that dark chapter. This was not just a famine, it was a national catastrophe, one that still shapes the lives of millions in North Korea today. And even now, UN reports warn that more than 40% of North Koreans remain undernourished, a chilling legacy of that dark chapter. International aid groups later warned that this was not simply a tragedy of nature, but a man-made disaster. The United Nations described the Arduous March as one of the worst humanitarian crises of the 20th century. Decades later, survivors continue to share their painful memories so the world does not forget. Even today, markets born in desperation remain the lifeline for millions. Hunger may not be as visible as in the 1990s, but the scars remain. Malnutrition, stunted growth, and the memory of starvation still haunt an entire generation. Stories like this must be remembered, not hidden. Want to know more about North Korea's untold history? Check out my other videos for stories based on real events and real people.